Good evening. This video, we're going to start looking at Gene Kim's video. It's very disturbing to see how many people respond positively to this. This is why these videos have to be made. Because there's so little Bible teaching out there that when people see someone Bible teaching, they immediately just start saying, well, hallelujah, hallelujah, and praising this guy. And because, just like Brian Dengler and Robert Breaker and these guys, because they're pro-King James Bible and pro-Jewish, so they run, dispensationalists were going to go ignoring what they were saying. But if you're a teacher out there, if you're a gifted teacher, you have to get the books, people. The videos aren't enough. The videos, basically, we can't cover everything on the video. You have to read the books. You have to read what he says. If you want to know what Ruckman says, you have to read what he says. Get Gene Kim's book. That way, these people say, "Oh, hey, just making, you just make it." I'm telling you, read the books. If you're a teacher, now you're an average person, you don't have to get to teaching. You have another spiritual gift. You don't have to worry about reading the books. Just read the scriptures. You'll see exactly what the truth God, Holy Spirit will reveal to you, and these videos will be enough. But if you're teaching, you got to explain this. You got to dig deep into this stuff to know what these guys are saying, to understand their argument, and be able to root it out. And to me, the best way to get their books so you understand what they're saying, obviously, but then you really know where they're coming from. Then you really know how insidious and wicked this system is, and how they're always shifting on you. In the hybrid system they've created. No one had assurance of the Old Testament salvation. No one knew where they were going to go when they died. And of course, he's bringing up Abraham's salvation. He's going to James too. What about Lot? Lot didn't have any works. What about the thief on the cross? He didn't have any works. What are you talking about? If you had to be saved by justification before men, a faith that had to be matured, a lot of guys ain't going in Abraham's bosom. We know Lot was, and he's called just Lot. Noah's called a just man. That's being justified. Noah wasn't justified before anybody. God called him just. Lot was called just, first and second Peter. But what these guys do is they run around and they hope you don't remember what's really going on in the scriptures. So this is Gene Kim going hysterical now, and he's not able to think correctly. What Ruckman taught on this was simply Abraham was not justified in Genesis 15, but he was saved. He calls him saved. And then his faith was matured, so he wasn't justified until Genesis 21 or 22.
Is so important and so salient that helped many of you, especially those watching.
He always starts off with this idea. It just helps you so much in understanding how to get saved. As if these guys read through the King James Bible and came up with the idea that, people are saved by works. Oh, no, we'll just put that in a dispensation. It's just faith alone in this dispensation. This is the lie this guy keeps preaching everybody. It's helped you so much.
Online, solving the fears and the worries when you read certain passages about losing salvation, how you have to do good works.
You see that? All these guys do is just throw them out. Instead of what a Bible teacher is supposed to do is reconcile them, harmonize them, explain them. These guys say, they lost salvation and they had to do works, but that was this different dispensation. Don't worry about it. And the guy says, "What are you talking about? God wouldn't allow that." That's the excuse. That's the excuse that Ruckman had. The logical fallacy Ruckman started with was the idea, these guys can't be wrong. There has to be some basis of fact for these guys thinking there's a faith work system. I know what I'll do. I'll rightly divide and just take all the Old Testament passage and say they had no assurance of salvation. No one knew where they were going. They had no eternal security. And I'll just say the church age, we faith alone and we know where we're going. That's all.
But then when you learned about, rightly dividing salvation to the Christian church, which is different from the nation of Israel, which majority of those passages where it talks about faith and works is applied to the nation of Israel, and then you are worried and concerned, but then this doctrine, dispensationalism, has helped you. So anyone who has a question concerning about solving the contradiction with Romans chapter 4 and James 2, I would recommend for you to watch my...
You notice, Kim is saying there's a contradiction between Romans 4 and James 2. Breaker never tells you that. Breaker thinks, Abraham had no right to boast before God because he would have right to boast but not well before God. He doesn't tell you there's a contradiction.
Previous drawing that I just did, and I'll put a link below this video, okay? So if you watch that video, it will help solve the contradiction easily of Romans 4 and James 2, and you're going to go, wow, this is so helpful. So before you watch this teaching that I'm about to do right now, you should watch the previous drawing that I did, and I'll put the video link.
He's just going to say ignore what Paul says. What Ruckman says is Adam, Noah, and Abraham were saved by faith. Grace through faith. But their faith, and he says there, because Adam has nowhere, it doesn't show up in Hebrews 11, their faith had to be perfected. That's how Ruckman explains it.
Below. That way you can see why this is important to talk about. Dispensational salvation.
I'm glad he says it's important. You see that, people? So I'm going to get all his little students coming. You're just obsessed with this. They don't want us talking about it. They want to be able to talk about it without getting any kickback on it, any feedback on it.
It'll help you. But there are people who have the audacity and the strangeness to hate dispensational salvation when it's supposed to save a lot of lives out there and even souls. So here's what they do.
He thinks he's saving souls by lying to them. That dispensational salvation. And that's what he's going to do. He's going to lie to you now. And that's that he thinks, Ruckman solved the problem. We just put everybody in the Old Testament under a work system and everybody in the New Testament under the faith alone system. Wow! Why didn't anybody think of that one before? Ruckman was the first guy that came up with that plan.
What they do is that with Romans chapter 4, it is very plain when you look at Romans chapter 4, Paul talked about faith not by works. And then it's very plain when you look at James chapter 2 that there is a faith that has to have works. And works. So that's found at James chapter 2.
Let me read here. This is from Genesis. This is from Ruckman's commentaries. And he goes here, it says here, the sinner is justified by believing without works, Genesis 15:6. The believer should carefully note that James 2 is not dealing with Genesis 15:6, what Abram was saved in the New Testament sense. So Abram was saved in Genesis 15. James 2:21 is dealing with Genesis 22 many years after Genesis 15:6. Yeah? And that shows his walk. His growth. Let's see. So he's got a guy being saved without being justified. Now, none of these things happened to Abraham. Hence, there's a gap between his salvation and his justification. They're telling you, now he's going to say justification, you're saved. They're telling you, what Ruckman tells you is that he was saved. He has to say that because that's what Paul says. He was saved in Genesis 15, but he wasn't justified. How can you be saved without being justified, people? That's lunacy. Lunacy.
So, this idea we easily solve by what? It's called rightly dividing.
Oh, it's so easy. We just rightly divide. We just ignore the contradiction. We just cut it right in half. The Solomon's approach. We just cut the baby in half.
Which I taught to you. That's it. This is for Christians, simple. And this is for Jews in the tribulation, simple. And again, watch the previous drawing and the video link will be...
So simple. Just ignore most of the scriptures.
underneath. Now, this solves a contradiction and your fear and concern. It's so easy.
It's so easy. No one's justified by faith and works in any dispensation. James 2 is talking about a walk. Rahab was justified by lying to the, in Joshua. protecting the spies. Faith. Paul is not talking about a difference in dispensations. Paul is explaining how Abraham was saved by faith alone. James is talking about showing that faith by his works. And that goes back to 1909 in Schofield, those people.
People hate dispensational salvation.
Good, I'm glad he says that. That's exactly right. We hate the heresy. We do hate dispensational salvation. And that's why I go after it so hard.
I don't know why.
You don't know why? Because it's a lie. You don't know why? Because it's the biggest bunch of baloney anyone ever put together.
So what they would do is that because they hate this idea of the verse saying that you have to have works as a part of your salvation. They hate that idea.
Yeah, anybody who believes in faith alone would hate that idea because it's a lie. God can't accept your works for salvation. That's what Paul's saying. That's what Paul says. He says you can't. God won't accept your works.
So because they have that, what they will do is that they will not honestly let the verse read for itself.
Oh, see that? This is a guy who thinks Genesis 15:6 said Abraham was believing in the stars to get saved. He says we can't read the passage correctly as itself. No, we read the passage exactly what it says, and it's talking about showing your faith.
They're going to insert their interpretation onto it.
No, we don't insert anything. We read the passage. But we know we got to reconcile what James is talking about, which says show your faith, as opposed to Paul is having the faith before God, and James is having the faith before men. Showing your faith to men.
And when you come across that kind
of... This is all muddying the water. He gets up there, we read the verse, we don't interpret it. Okay.
Person, it should put a red flag on you that...
See? A red flag, you're interpreting the verse, you're not reading the verse.
They're really King James.
Like you can...
James only.
See?
Because they're not...
Amen. See that, people? We're not the King James Bible believers. See that? This little fringe cult little group think they're the real King James Bible believers. If you reject that, so I guess, everybody had it wrong. Schofield had it wrong. Everyone's had it wrong. Larkin's had it wrong. Everyone's got this wrong. That James is part of the epistle to the church. For us, general epistles. They all got that wrong.
Says one, and are they really dispensationalists? Because they refuse to divide it.
See what I told you? I told you this is why it started. One, they're going to deny that we're King James Bible believers, and two, we're dispensationalists. This is where it's going, people. If you reject this dispensational heresy, they're going to say these guys aren't real King James Bible believers, and that we are dispensationalists.
They refuse to divide the salvation.
No, we understand to divide the salvation. We would like to Huffman had it correctly. Aspects. One is before God, one is before man.
So that should concern you. So, this...
Now he's telling, don't listen to anybody who refutes this. That's what he's telling his students.
This is how they justify it, which is a very complicated argument. How they argue is that in James chapter 2, they argue that, this justification is before men. So this...
That's what Hoffman said.
Has nothing...
You better go after Hoffman. That's what he said.
...to do with your salvation. This is simply a justification before men that has nothing to do with your salvation. And this red ink gave up the ghost. Okay, I'll have to get a different red ink later on. So then, they call this a justification before men that has nothing to do with your salvation. And then Romans 4, this justification has to do with your salvation. And that's justification before God. Now look at these fancy kind of terms that they pull up, right? And you're like, where did they get that idea from?
What's fancy about saying one's before men, one's before God? Fancy? What's fancy about that? It's clear as a bell.
Right? I know some of you are wondering that now. Like, okay, that's quite an interpretation. How are you going to...
Interpretation. You got to reconcile Paul with James. Paul is saying a man isn't justified by works. James is saying he is justified by works. Paul is saying Abraham wasn't justified by works. Not just man. James is saying he was justified by works. You got to reconcile.
Prove that one has to do with salvation and the other one does not have to do with salvation. So this is their idea. So what they will do is that rather than just simply the word as it is, they want to try to define it for you, interpret it for you. So justified, what it means is to be declared righteous. That's the idea. So not all the...
So when Jesus Christ is considered justified in the Spirit, what does that mean? Was that to do with salvation? Or it had to do it before men?
Time doesn't mean salvation. It only means declared righteous. It doesn't have to refer to salvation all the time. So, the idea...
It doesn't have to refer to salvation all the time. Now, when he was dealing with James Knox in his books, he said, James Knox said it never referred to salvation anytime. That's when we lied about James Knox, people.
This. How they interpret it is in James chapter 2, men, when they look at your works, you know, you're probably smoking, drinking, your works are bad, then by looking at that, they can't declare you righteous. See, that's how they get around this passage. That has nothing to do with salvation. It's just that in people's eyes, you don't look righteous.
Yeah, testimony shot. And that's what Ruckman said about Lot. He had no testimony. That's why they never talk about Lot.
So look at James chapter 2, how they argue this. They will quote verse 17, even so faith, if it hath not works, is dead, being alone. So they're simply arguing right here, in man's eyes, your Christianity looks...
Let's see, 1 Timothy 3:16, without controversy, great is the mystery of godliness. God was manifest in the flesh, justified in the Spirit. Jesus Christ was justified. Oh, that did with salvation? No, that was that before men. He was justified in the Spirit. Before men, no one could accuse him of anything wrong.
Dead to you. So you look like a dead Christian. See, that's the idea. You have a dead faith. So it has nothing to do with your salvation. It's just simply, when I look at your Christian life, you look dead. So your faith is dead. That's how they argue. Then they word it right here, if you keep reading down, in verse 18, yea, a man may say, thou hast faith and I have works. Show me thy faith without thy works, and I will show thee my faith by my works. So notice right here, it's a man seeing. It's a man seeing. So in his eyes, you're not declared righteous. That's their idea. Whereas here, in Romans chapter 4, what is it? It's before God. So in God's eyes, you're declared righteous, hence it refers to salvation. That's how they get around it. So,
you get around it. That's how we explain it. That's how we get around it. That's how you explain it.
This passage has to do with salvation, and this one has nothing to do with salvation. Okay, now, the simple debunking to this argument is this.
This should be good.
You can work like this with your interpretation, but here's the idea. You can work the interpretation the other way too, where you can say, this is referring to salvation. Now you might say, how so?
Yeah, that would be God's your question. Now you talk about, now he's going to really get to salvation. The point is, Paul is appearing to contradict James. See, they just forget the argument. Paul is saying Abraham wasn't justified by works. Now, either one, if you don't talk about how you reconcile and say, well, one is before God and one is before man, then you got a contradiction. You say, well, we accept James at the expense of Paul, we accept Paul at the expense of James. There's no way around it, people. You got to say, okay, they're both right in different ways.
Because here's the problem right here, okay? When you got saved in Jesus Christ, you were justified, correct? What does justified mean? You're declared righteous, right? Okay.
Before God. People don't know anything about you. In your walk, you're declared righteous before God.
So then, when you get saved, weren't you declared righteous?
Yeah, before God.
Yeah.
Not before men. They don't know about your salvation.
Then, right here, just because you argue justified means to be declared righteous, how do you not know that refers to salvation then?
What? Because we add on to the argument, Kim, before men. How has this guy got a PhD in anything? One is before God, declared righteous before God, and one is declared righteous before men. James is saying you have to show your faith. When the 4 men let down the paralyzed guy through the ceiling, when the Lord was there, the Lord saw their faith by what they did. This is why you argue and you deliberately twist arguments. James is saying justification, declared righteous before men. When people see you be acting as a Christian, they say that's a just guy. That's a just guy, and you glorify God because you're not doing it from your own flesh. You're doing it from God. God's fruit. He gets the glory. What do you think the martyrs? People saying these guys are the seed, the blood of the martyrs, the seed of the church, because people would see him die for God and say, "Wow, those guys are serious."
Yeah, because when you all got saved, weren't you declared righteous
before God? This guy's a halfwit.
Yeah, you were all declared righteous
before God.
You were all justified
before God,
right? So how?
Not before men. Men come before men comes maturity. That's why they won't deal with Lot. Here's about Lot. In Ruckman's, page 1630. Lot is described as just, righteous, and godly. He is a saved man in the Old Testament sense. But you would never have known that had the Lord not revealed it to you in this passage. That's right. According to these guys, Lot should have been lost. To listen to some preachers, you would think no one could do the things Lot did and be saved. But he could. And you see 1 Corinthians 5:1. Well, he did in the Old Testament. So he's saying Lot's a saved man. Lot stands as a type of the backsliding Christian who loses everything at the judgment seat of Christ. Then he goes on here, let's see, about the word godly. But here's Lot. and Buckman says Lot was a saved man. You couldn't get around it. Did he show his work to anybody? Was he justified in front of anybody? No.
We know this has to do with salvation or nothing to do with salvation.
Because it's for men. Oh, you Ruckman people are just idiots.
Well, it's before men.
There we go. Okay.
Well, that's not helpful because.
But it's not helpful. Why is it not helpful?
How do you not know that? Because before men, your works are very bad. That's why they're saying that you're a lost person, you're not saved. Well,
that's why you can't tell if a person's saved or not. I don't know what this guy got a degree in, but it wasn't thinking. If you're not performing works, no one's going to know you're saved. If you are performing works, people at least can say, okay, this guy looks like a Christian.
How do you not know that? Just because someone looks at your work and they look at you and then they're like, well, your work is not good. So because of that, I can't declare you a saved person.
Yeah, so that's the issue. Your testimony's shot.
See that? So it could work either or.
What? No. That's the reason you have maturity. That's the reason why you show your faith. To glorify God and people know you're a Christian.
So how do you not know James was arguing for that?
Because James is talking about show me before men, not being justified by God. Because Paul comes up after James and says Abraham wasn't justified by works.
Oh, you got to realize this. Interpretation could go either or.
No interpretation. We're not interpreting anything. We're reading what the passage says and we're harmonizing.
Well, it's justification before men. Well, that's not even helpful right there.
What do you mean it's not helpful? It's not even helpful. That's the point. He's being declared righteous before men, just like Jesus Christ was. Justified in the Spirit. Declared righteous by men. Who can convince him of sin? Who convicts me of sin? Nobody. And that's the point. James is talking about, we talked about in 1 John 3. Don't love in word and in tongue, but in deed and in truth.
See, it doesn't help.
It does help. He just threw out, this guy is the most illogical thinker. I've never seen anybody as dumb as this guy.
So then, how are we going to argue these two cases right here?
How are we going to argue? Here we go.
Okay, so the idea is this. So we have to look at the scriptures on which interpretation works. I'm not invalidating their interpretation right here, okay? You could work like this.
Okay, all right.
But the problem is this. If you're going to be totally honest, you can switch a root with that too.
No, you can't. Because Paul says the opposite. You can't switch him. That's the point. Paul is saying Abraham was not justified by works. And James is saying, oh yeah, he was justified by works. That's why you can't switch him. Because Abraham is talking about salvation by faith alone, and James is talking about the walk.
You can switch a root with that.
You can't switch a root.
Say it could be referring to salvation. Okay.
No, you can't. Because of Paul. You can't do it because of Paul. Paul creates the problem.
So then, we have to look at the verse, and it will tell you if it has something to do with salvation, or it has zero to do with salvation. Okay, so let's look at James chapter 2.
Now, that's what he's going to say in this book here. He's going to say, well, James clearly talks about salvation, and it doesn't. It doesn't tell anything about salvation, which then it would contradict Paul.
Again, okay? Look at verse 19. Thou believest that there is one God. So James is saying, okay, so then you believe. All right, that's good. Thou doest well. Look at this part. That what? Devils also believe and tremble. If this has nothing to do with salvation, why would James put a serious point pointing out the lost condition of Satan and his minions here?
He's talking about the lost condition of the devils. He's not talking about them getting saved. He's talking about knowing that there's a just God and judgment's coming on them. That's what he's talking about there. The devils also believe and tremble. What do you think they're trembling over? Judgment coming. They know what's coming for them. This is not dealing with eternal salvation. This is dealing with the issue of judgment in your walk. If you don't have faith, if you have faith without your works, you're getting judged. That's why in 1 Corinthians 11. These guys cannot read and think outside of a 4th grade level.
Okay.
Oh, that's good, boy. Oh, that's good.
So this has something serious to do with your salvation.
He's talking about the devils know judgment's coming on them. They believe and tremble. What are they trembling over? Judgment.
Otherwise, James would not be pointing out the lost condition of the devil.
They're not talking about the lost condition of the devil. They're talking about the fact that the devils know judgment's coming. The devils also believe, they're fully persuaded about God. And what do they know? They have a lake of fire waiting for them. That's where they tremble.
It's not just Satan. He just lost his fellowship with Jesus Christ like a typical Christian. But he is eternally...
James is talking about judgment. Punishment in James 2 if you don't bear fruit. He isn't just talking about showing the faith in the sense of getting righteous. Also, he talks about the idea of dead faith is going to result in some serious problems for the Christian.
Cured and going to heaven like we are. See, that doesn't work, right? That doesn't work. But here's a more obvious case right here. The more obvious case is, well, before I give the more obvious case, let me go through a little bit more specific.
Well, let's go back and read the entire passage, Kim. Let's go back here and read what it says here.
With your salvation. Otherwise, James would... Okay, so then we have to look at the verse, and it will tell you if it has something to do with salvation or it has zero to do with salvation. Okay, so let's look at James chapter 2 again, okay? Look at verse 19. Thou believest that there is one God. So James is saying, okay, so then you believe. All right, that's good. Thou doest well. Look at this part. That what? Devils also believe and tremble. If this has...
And tremble. What's it trembling about? Not eternal salvation. It's the judgment coming on them.
Nothing to do with salvation. Why would James put a serious...
What does the devil's trembling have to do with anything with salvation? It has to deal with their judgment.
Pointing out the lost condition of Satan and his minions here.
He's not talking about the lost condition. He's talking about their judgment coming. They're trembling.
Okay, so this has
That's
something
good.
serious to do with your salvation.
It ain't salvation. It talks about devils trembling. It's talking about judgment.
Otherwise, James would not be pointing out the lost condition of the devil.
No, it's talking about them trembling. Because they believe what God is going to do to them.
It's not just Satan, he just lost his fellowship with Jesus Christ like a typical Christian, but he is eternally secured and going to heaven like we are. See, that doesn't work, right?
It doesn't work! Ridiculous. You want to see what a Christian loses if he doesn't bear fruit? According to Peter Ruckman in his thing about Lot? Let's see here. Lot stands a private backslidden Christian who loses everything at the judgment seat of Christ. And he has another verse on that. Where he tells he lists everything he lost. Let's see. Well, Christian, he's got a point. When the Christian loses everything, I have to look for that verse where he talks about that, including his life. So the idea you're backslidden and not bearing fruit is not irrelevant. Oh well, you're going to be chastened. You're going to lose your rewards. You're going to lose your health. You're going to lose your testimony, and you could easily lose your life in 1 Corinthians 11. And Ruckman has a note on that.
Doesn't work. But here's a more obvious case right here. The more obvious case is, well, before I give the more obvious case, let me go through a little bit more specific points. Look at verse 17. Even so faith, if it hath not works, is what? Dead, being alone. You notice how they worded this, right? Well, if you have a dead Christian faith, when your works are that poor, that's why you're a dead Christian. But by wording like that, you can't step around where you're deliberately saying dead faith. Here's the idea. A Christian, when he is dead in his Christian life, it's his works that are dead, not his faith.
Well, you're a nut. Your faith produces your works. 10 minutes in, he can't even figure out the Christian walk, people. Your faith produces your works. That goes back to John 15. Jesus Christ is the vine. And it goes back to Ephesians. You have to yield to the Romans. You have to yield to the Holy Spirit, Romans 6. And Galatians 5. Your faith produces the works. If you have a dead work, it shows you have a dead faith.
You got to realize this. Paul and James, their issue with justification is living and dying by faith or by works. Because here's some examples. Let me explain right here. We're going to look at Romans chapter 1, verse 17. Romans chapter 1, verse 17. Living and dying with justification have to do with salvation, whether you like it or not. Look at Romans chapter 1 and verse 17.
Your walk had to deal with justified before men. Paul's talking about justification before God. Don't forget that, people, as he tries to move all around the place. Let me continue, I guess. Let me stop here and put this up. Yeah, 30 minutes in. And deal with that. I want to see if I can find that quote where it tells you the things you can lose, which include his life. And Ruckman talks about Lot. Lot lost everything. And, no, actually it was in Huffman's. It was in Huffman's note. I guess that's the best way I meant it. And I'll pick it up and look at it. You just hear how he said that? You have dead works but not a dead faith? The reason you have a dead works is because you have a dead faith. Yeah, if your faith was alive, you'd be producing works. You'd be yielding to the Holy Spirit. So stop with this up. Amen. Thank you.